I couldn't help it, but you know, I had to put a heart in it. It's Valentine's Day. And I also tried to find a matching title for the talk, you know, to address the Valentine's Day. But yeah, my name is Fiona Langenberger. I'm the Communications and Program Coordinator for the Pacific Islands Ocean Observing System, in short, Pac IOOS. And for today's presentation, I want to give you an overview, an introduction into what Pac IOOS is, like where we are, who we are, what we do. And then next, I want to discuss some of the observations that we collect throughout Hawaii and the Pacific Islands region. I also want to go through some of the forecasts that we generate. And then last but not least, address the data visualization and how we're doing that, and you know, how you can access all the different bits and pieces of data that we have. All right, so starting big picture, we are part of the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System. Their abbreviation is IOOS, so we're Pac IOOS. We're one of the 11 regional associations. You can see, hang on, I think I have you can see my mouse here, right? So this is us over here, pretty large region, obviously. The Alaska Ocean Observing System is also like a giant area to cover. But, you know, like the West Coast, the East Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbeans are all covered, also the Great Lakes. Our headquarters, so the US IOOS, is based within NOAA, within the National Ocean Service line office. So the IOOS staff are federal staff, but then all the different regional associations are set up in different ways. Some are nonprofit, some are based within institutions. And we are based within the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So most of our staff, most of our co-investigators are all based within the university here. However, we have a really large region to cover. So it's not just Hawaii. It's the entire U.S. Pacific Islands region. So it's the territories, American Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And then also the freely associated states, that's Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. And then all the minor outlying islands like Palmyra, Wake Island. So it's a really, really, you know, big ocean, obviously. And we're trying our best to, you know, balance the needs and address those, you know, ocean observing needs throughout the region. So what is Pac IOOS? So Pacific Islands Ocean Observing System. Like, our mission is to empower ocean users and stakeholders throughout the Pacific Islands by providing accurate and reliable coastal and ocean information, tools, and services that are easy to access and use. So we like to call ourselves an ocean data provider. And there's different components to it. We have the component of collecting coastal and ocean observations. So we have assets in the water, we have equipment in the water to collect these observations. We also have models that can generate forecasts. And then we also deal with a lot of partner data, not just the stuff that we generate or that we collect, but also data from, let's say, NOAA, from other nonprofit organizations, from other researchers. We work with them and help with the data management. So we have a lot of data management going on. We have staff programming, you know, just coding away so that ultimately the data is accessible and we can also visualize the data. Because otherwise it's just going to sit on someone's shelf or someone's file cabinet or hard drive, and it's not going to go out there. this is just kind of as an FYI that, our management sits within the university, but we do have a governing council. It's 18 members, and they do represent all the different parts of the region to make sure we get input, not just through the governing council. Obviously, we have other partners in the region too, but they're kind of like the go-to folks that we reach out to make sure that we cover geographically our entire region, and also get feedback from different sectors. So, it could be industry, it could be nonprofits, like researchers, agencies, federal, local, it's all those different players. We have a really diverse stakeholder base, very different types of users. So trying to address all those different needs, can be a challenge, but we're really stakeholder driven, and that's the governing council is one way to solicit that input. We also have regional liaisons in American Samoa, Guam, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. So we have folks on the ground that, when we get there or when we have requests, that we can, easily just reach out and have that connection right there. All right, so let's dive into the coastal and ocean observations. I'm going to start with the most popular asset that we have. It's our wave buoys, or wave riders. We have 15 of them. You can see we have 5 throughout the insular Pacific, those dots over here. Hang on, actually, I think I can make this a laser pointer, so let's do this. Okay, so we have 3 in Guam and Saipan. We have 1 in the Marshall Islands, and we have 1 in American Samoa. And then if we click one further, you can also see that we have 10 more in Hawaii. So we have pretty good coverage here. 1 is off Hanalei, of Kauai. Then here for Oahu, we have 1 off Waimea, 3 on the windward side, 1 off Pearl Harbor, and 1 off Barbers Point, Kalailua. So that's commercial harbor. And then we have another one off Lanai, then 1 on the north shore of Maui, and 1 off Hilo. So on the left, on the right side, you can see what they look like. It's kind of like a roundish ball in the water. And they're literally riding the waves. Like they're going up and down with the motion, of the waves. And the buoy collects information on wave height, wave direction, wave period, and also sea surface temperature. The last one might not seem super intuitive, and you may wonder what it's used for, but it is nice to have a sea surface temperature record, continuously. So it's a low-hanging fruit, like it can be measured easily, and so we keep that record too. They record in 30-minute intervals, so it's basically in real time. The buoy records consistent, like it's just throughout. It's not every 30 minutes, but we receive the data every 30 minutes, and then it gets up to us, and we serve it right out. So let's look at the funny schematic here. On the left side, you can see the mooring setup. So this is just a schematic. Like the ocean is much deeper, sometimes it's like 200 meters. Like this is obviously not to scale, but just to give you a rough idea, there's always a mooring weight, and then you have the mooring line. And towards the buoy, you can see there's a rubber cord, which gives a little bit of an extra stretch. The mooring line is always twice the length of the depth of the water. So, there's slack in the line. We also have like sinker weights and floats to make sure that the line doesn't entangle in itself. And so one thing that's really cool, and kind of speaking towards the technology part, is that little yellow thing right at the right at the anchor. It's called an acoustic release. So, for example, if the buoy breaks free at the rubber cord, because it's really rough conditions, the buoy breaks free, cuts loose, and goes away. We still have like all this line in the water, and we wouldn't want this to become debris. Plus, the line is really expensive. So we have an acoustic release at the bottom. So our researchers would go out to the GPS coordinate where the mooring is, and have like a deck station that sends a signal, an acoustic signal, and tells the acoustic to release, to let go. And so then the release lets go, and like the entire line with the floats like come up to the surface, and we can recover the whole mooring line.
This is obviously measuring surface waves. It doesn't look as if there's any gizmo on there to record seismic waves or anything.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the buoys measure or can record waves up to a period of 40 seconds. Normally, like if you have like just the wind generated swell, it's normally like not more than 20 seconds ish, but the buoys could technically go up to 40 seconds. If there would be something like a tsunami, those waves have like much longer periods. So those wave rider buoys are not tsunami buoys. So they would not detect a tsunami. You might be able to tell that there's something different, but this is not the type of buoy that would be used to detect tsunamis. Another reason why they also wouldn't be very helpful is the buoys are only 4 miles offshore. So by the time the buoy would record this, we're screwed, So you want those tsunami buoys way further outside, like hundreds of miles offshore, so that you can tell, like when something is approaching. Well, this is more like, coastal ocean observing, where it's it's still like deep water, but it's fairly close to shore. So, so that's the mooring setup in a nutshell. You can tell like from the schematic there, half of the buoy is submerged, the other half is like sticking out. There's a little antenna with a light, so it's easy to see the buoy. Also during the night, but it's also in all of the nautical charts. So everyone on the water should be aware of like where the buoys are. However, the buoys are moving, because there is this circle that they can rotate, and it's a watch circle basically. So even if we have the GPS coordinate of the mooring, the buoy might be fairly far away from that area. So the data collects, the buoy collects data continuously, but every half an hour it packages up and sends it via satellite to our researchers. And, obviously it's all automated at this point, but, through programming scripts, we can retrieve the data and then make it accessible to the public, and it's all freely accessible on our website. It's listed here. I've also put out stickers. There's the website, so you can get everything on the website that I'm talking about today. I just put in some photos so you can kind of see the proportions. Like sometimes people think those buoys are giant. They're not really that giant. They're kind of small, as you can see. So what you can see in the photo is basically what you can see above the water line. The lower portion of the buoy is submerged. I also thought it's kind of interesting to put a photo in of like what the buoy looks like inside. So on the upper photo, you can see those. Well, you might not be able to see it there well. So there's batteries in there. And you can see the cables, how they're connected. So there's about 50 of these size of batteries in there, and they last for about 2 years. So every 2 years, we have to exchange the batteries to make sure that there's continuous operation. And the lower photo, that's like basically the heart of the buoy. That's where the instrument is in. There is an accelerometer for its vertical displacement. And then there's also 2 accelerometers for its horizontal displacement. So that way it can tell like the height, also the period, and then the pitch and roll tell like which direction it's coming from. So it can record all of that and, you know, package it up and send it to us. So I have a little video. It just gives you a little bit of an idea on like what this looks like in action. Hang on.
Surfers and many other ocean users have another valuable tool at their disposal. The Pacific Islands Ocean Observing System, or Pac IOOS, deployed a new wave buoy off Kailua Barbers Point recently. The buoy provides real-time information on wave height, wave direction, wave period, and sea surface temperature.
So we're really excited that the Pac IOOS Kailua Barbers Point wave buoy is now redeployed on site. A lot of our users, stakeholders, and partners were greatly anticipating this buoy being back in the water.
Pac IOOS is based at the University of Hawaii at Honolulu's School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology, and is one of 11 regional associations of the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System. Many commercial and recreational ocean users, as well as state and federal agencies, utilize Pac IOOS wave buoy data to assess ocean conditions, allowing for safe operations and ocean use.
Hawaii is an ocean state, and there's a wide range of commercial and recreational activities close to shore and in nearshore waters. So these buoys take the pulse of the sea and give you a clear picture of what the wake field is like. So that's hugely important, whether it's for safety or whether it's you're out there trying to surf a wave.
Data from the Kailua Barbers Point wave buoy, along with other Pac IOOS wave buoy data, are available online at pacios.org.
So this is what it looks like when we deploy and, you know, get the buoy into the water. Oops. Hang on. All right. One thing that I wanted to point out, just because, you know, we had this event last weekend, the storm. It just kind of is a great example of like ocean observing in action. I was at home. I did not want to go out because I didn't want any tree to fall on my car or on me. So I was like, okay, I'll stay inside. But here comes like our buoys and our ocean observing assets. We can, you know, see basically what's happening out there just from our computer. So we got some records. The wave buoy of Hanalei measured 38 foot of significant wave height. And I kind of circled it like the peak. So it was just a short period of time, a couple of hours max, you know, where it was that high. For the Hanalei one, I think Hanalei is probably in something like 200 meters. Yeah, but I would have to, like, they're all different. Like so most of them are like around 3 to 4 miles offshore, but it kind of depends on the bathymetry and, you know, where we can place it. I can tell you after the talk because it's all on the website. But yeah, so that was significant. Almost 40 foot waves in significant wave height. The max height, so I should say, so the significant wave height, you look at like a period of time, like for us, it's like the 30 minutes, and then they take the average of the highest third of all the waves measured during those 30 minutes, and that's the significant wave height. But then you might have like some really big waves, you know, during those 30 minutes, and that's like the max wave height. And for Hanalei, we measured 60 feet maximum wave height. So there was, maybe it was just one wave, but there was one wave at least that had like 60-foot wave height during that time. So, you know, that's pretty crazy. Like I was, you know, on my phone, like checking the buoys like every half an hour to see how, you know, it's climbing up and how it's getting bigger. And then the cool thing too is because the storm was approaching from the north, so Hanalei, Kauai got it first. Like by the time Hanalei was reaching its peak, it wasn't quite there yet on Oahu. So Waimea was a little bit delayed, but you could tell that, you know, it also was like, you know, going up, and it was also reaching almost 30-foot and significant wave height. So yeah, like we were, you know, I guess we're like the nerds, like sitting there with our data, but getting totally excited. And we also were excited that none of the buoys broke free. You know, it was like, knock on wood. But it does happen. Sorry, you have a question?
Is there anywhere where it shows the max? You guys show the max?
We don't show the max on the website. We only show the significant wave height. But it is measured in the background, so we can access that data. All right.
Max and Waimea.
I'm not sure, but I'm guessing, you know, just could be, yeah, 40, 50, around that.
It's 70K, maybe.
Yeah, well, it was even like the significant wave height was already 10 foot lower than Hanalei, so it probably was also, the max wave height was also lower. Alrighty. Moving on, so that was the wave component, how we measure wave height, period, and direction. And then we also measure sea surface currents in real time. So it's measured with land-based stations. And you can see, like for Oahu, we have a pretty large field that we cover. And for the Big Island, it's around Hilo. The current information is extremely important for the Coast Guard. So if there is a missing person or like someone, like a vessel lost at sea, the real-time information on what the current field looks like helps them to narrow down their search field, and obviously then increases the chances that they will find someone. So initially, when you know when Pac IOOS was established, the priority area was identified as like the south and west shore of Oahu, just because that's where most of the accidents happen. There was, for example, like it was like a couple of years ago, a stand-up paddler who was not experienced, but it was on a day with I think it was even like warning level, and he lost his paddle and didn't know really what to do, and he started drifting, and he drifted at the end. He drifted all the way to Eva, but you know they found him over there, and it's just. Yeah, it's important to have that initial, like that additional input for the Coast Guard. So we serve that in real time. Well, I stole my thunder already.
On the website.
Yep, it's also on the website. It's also, the currents are also used, current information is also used by fishermen. And then it's probably hard to tell on this photo, but if there would be an oil spill, fingers crossed, or some other hazardous spill, there would also be information to then see what the trek could potentially be in real time. Another coastal and ocean observing asset that we have is our water quality monitoring. So we have nearshore sensors and also water quality buoys that measure temperature, salinity, depth, chlorophyll, and turbidity. And then 2 of the buoys can also measure dissolved oxygen and pH, but we haven't really used that much. So the stars on the map, that's where every like all the sensors and the buoys are located. We have a little bit more focus on the insular Pacific with the water quality instrumentation. But this is a closer look of what this looks like. So the water quality buoy on the left side, this one is off Pelikane on the Big Island, on the Kona side. So, you know, it looks somewhat similar to our wave buoys. Also, the mooring is, you know, a somewhat similar setup as the wave buoys. And then on the right side is the nearshore sensor. And you can also see in the small photo, like how we attach it to structures that are already in the water. You know, like obviously we're not going to damage reef or anything. So we try to attach it to something that's already there. But, you know, it's a CTD, so like a conductivity, temperature, and depth sensor. And then we have additional sensors for chlorophyll and turbidity. Those are optical sensors. So the nice thing is, you know, with all this instrumentation, like you do not have to go out all the time to, you know, collect the information. Like the sensor just does it for you. So it's much more automated. Yes.
No question. Because these buoys are so close to shore, and perhaps especially if they're identified as federal government, is there damage to them from, you know, people just poking at them?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So I will say vandalism hasn't been a big issue. Fingers crossed. I will say though that the wave buoys in particular also serve as FADs, like fish aggregation devices. So it's basically if you are in the open ocean and you have something in the water, fish tend to go there. And so fishermen know that. And so we often find fishing line or hooks in our mooring line. But there is no intentional vandalism, you know, because it also benefits, the data benefits fishermen, but then again, like they also want to have the buoy in the water. So in fact, we have a bunch of ocean users, boaters that help us keep an eye on them and tell us, you know, like if something is wrong or if they can't find it, or, you know, like we have GPS coordinates for them, so we know where the buoys are. But it's, yeah, like luckily it's not a big issue. We had 2 times when a buoy was run over by a vessel, and the buoy did not win. I can tell you that. The ship was more successful. But, you know, we learned from that. Like we actually redeployed those buoys, but we located them into slightly different positions, a little bit further out of the main shipping lanes. You know, shipping lanes also evolve over time if there's more commercial traffic. And so, for example, the Barbers Point one used to be in an okay spot, but it seemed like traffic was increasing and there were more and more ships going through that area where the buoy was. So we decided to take it a little bit further north, so it's out of the way, just to avoid damage. The buoys are expensive, so I mean, yeah.
What's the cost of replacement?
So the buoy itself is roughly around $70K. So it hurts if, yeah, it does hurt if they either, you know, like get run over, or if they break free and we can't recover them for whatever reason, which luckily doesn't happen very often. Is there another question?
On the positioning, I noticed you have 3 in the Kaneohe Bay area.
Mhm.
Can you maybe in the future sometime move one over to the Hanauma Bay or Sandy Beach or something else? Southeast?
Yeah, so the reason why there's so many over on the Kaneohe site is we received funding from the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. They have a wave energy site over there, and so it's basically informing their research. So we got funding through that, and that's why there are additional ones. But I hear what you're saying. There's always a need for more buoys. In particular, on the Big Island, we only have one on the Hilo side, but there's nothing on the Kona side. So we definitely, receive requests. For us, the I don't want to call it a problem, but what we have to keep in mind is like the purchase of the buoy is one thing, but we have to continue to maintain them. And like operations and maintenance isn't that sexy to sell, and to get additional funding for. But it is, it does require a lot of attention. So, yeah.
Holiday has its own revenue stream, which are admissions, so they can almost pay for it themselves.
Yeah, if someone suggests that.
Oh, so are these different than the surfboard buoys? You said there's a buoy that they don't measure the tsunamis up. Is that because it's too close? So the surfboard buoys, are they further out as well?
Yeah, so I can tell you that. I mean, I'm not doing the surf reports, but like as far as I know. So there are NOAA buoys really far offshore, like hundreds of miles. So those buoys are helpful to get a sense of that the swell has arrived. It's kind of like the first signal that something is coming. And then our wave buoys that are closer, around the islands are much more specific on, what's actually arriving around the islands. So websites like Surf News Network, Surfline, the NOAA forecast, the NOAA surf forecast through Pac IOOS, that's the buoys that they use. So like the Pac IOOS buoys are the ones that they look at. So that's the primary ocean observation that they have, in addition to whatever they go to, actually observe along the shoreline. And then they also have their own calculations and magic that they do to translate the value from what they see on the buoy to what it actually means on the shoreline. So that's something like that part of the interpretation is something that we as Pac IOOS don't do. It's something that folks like Surf News Network, Surfline, NOAA would do to turn that into a forecast or a report.
So it's about a 5-day difference from the buoys if they.
No, it's like the buoys that we have, like whatever you see on the buoy is what you see on. Yeah, but the difference is like if the buoy says it's like a 10-foot wave on the buoy, that's open ocean swell. Like it hasn't hit the reef yet. So most likely a 10-foot wave on the buoy is more likely in the height of 20 foot when it's breaking. So, but that really depends on where you are. Like North Shore is different than South Shore. Sandy's is different. It's all these little different nuances, and that's what those those surf forecasters do. They interpret that.
If you read, like you said, the first indication buoys,
Mhm.
because you'll look at the report and say, okay, 5-day forecast, 10-day forecast. So they're reading the initial, and then the two buoys. If it is 5 days before it's the near shore buoys, is it about a 5-day increment?
No, I think even from the ones that are just the NOAA buoys that are further out, it's still within the same day. Yeah. Yeah. But there's other forecasts that people look at, and those go out to 5 days in advance. So if there's, for example, a storm system in the South Pacific, they already have an eye on that storm system, and they know, okay, so many days later, that storm system that's in the South Pacific will generate the waves that will eventually arrive in Hawaii. So, but that's more forecasting. That's not the buoys, what you're thinking of.
Do you folks maintain all the buoys, your group?
Yeah.
Are there any that are maintained by non-Pac?
No, so we maintain them all. We do have 1 to 2 staff that are dedicated just to the wave buoys. So it's the regular maintenance, to change batteries and make sure that, they are operational, but then it's also the random ones when they break loose and, they have to go and chase them.
All your people.
Yeah, it's all our people, especially for Hawaii. For the Insular Pacific, we do work with folks, that have helped us in the past with the buoys. So like if there is an emergency when a buoy breaks free, like we ask them to go out because there's no way that like our staff flies to Guam in time to then catch the buoy. So we have someone else try to, get it. And then we're also trying to develop or help develop that capacity in the Insular Pacific that, we train more folks over there that, they can help more than, and it's not just us doing it.
But there are buoys out there that are not Pac IOOS. Like there's NOAA buoys.
Yeah.
200 miles out.
Yeah.
Those, you guys don't touch them.
No, we don't do those. Yeah. So like all the operations that we do, we have a small boat, we wouldn't be able to reach those far out. So it's all, like you saw it in the video, like it's a small boat. you can go like 5 miles offshore, but you don't want to go.
He was asking about 5-day forecasts and things like that. It depends if you're forecasting south swell or north swell. If north swell is going to reach us in your 4 days, so that could be real-time data from ships, buoys. But if you're forecasting 5 days out from the south swell, that's usually about a week. That's probably based on models.
Yeah, and I'm gonna touch on the forecasting part too, just in the next chapter. All right, let me continue here. So this is just to show you like a plot from the water quality sensors, what it looks like. Again, like all that data is available online. We do have a program that I wanted to just briefly address. It's called our Water Quality Sensor Partnership Program. So the sensors and buoys that I had shown before for the those ones, those are in there like long term. Like we've been measuring in some places, we've been measuring for like 9 to 10 years in the same spot. So, we try to get these like long-term time series, but we also identified the need to support agencies, but also nonprofits to help with specific projects. So for example, I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, we partnered with the Friends of Kevalos. It's a nonprofit organization. They were concerned that a harbor dredging project would stir up, a lot of sediment and would really impact the water quality. So we've, we gave them on a loaner base. We gave them a nearshore sensor, and we deployed it in Kevalo Basin, and I think it's still in there. It's about a year in, to capture, any differences. And that way, they can see, does it impact water quality? It's a very popular surf site, Kevalos, and, like they just want to make sure that it's not impacting the area or the reef. And if you can say something like, oh yeah, it always looks, murky, or, it looks like the project has like decreased the water quality. But if you actually have data, it makes a huge difference. So, we're trying to address those project-specific needs and help out by providing the sensor, but also by providing the expertise and the staff to help deploy it and maintain it and train, employees or staff or volunteers. On the left side, that's Malama, Mauna Lua. We have one currently in Mauna Lua Bay. So actually that's off Kahala. And so that's our staff and our student assistant working with the Malama Mauna Lua volunteers to train them and get them up to speed on, how to retrieve the data and how to clean it. And so, it's building that capacity. All right, then last but not least, for like the observational part, we're also supporting animal tracking, and I'm sure that's the one that you're most familiar with because that went, pretty viral through the media. So researchers at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, HIMB, they have been tracking tiger sharks to learn more about their spatial patterns and behaviors. The initial request came up, because I think around 2014 and 15, there were a lot of encounters in Maui. And so there was a question like, why are they, always in that area? But if you don't have any data, like you can't really prove or disprove anything. So they've tagged tiger sharks, and I can't remember the amount, but I think it was more than 20, could have been 40, to see like what their patterns are. And they found out that the sharks are really drawn to the coastal shelf. And there just happens to be a lot of coastal shelf area in the Maui Nui complex. So it's not that the sharks, just love Maui or love to attack people in Maui. It's just that the habitat of the sharks overlaps with like where a lot of people go in the water in Maui, and that's where the encounters happen. But what we do for Pac IOOS, we help with the data, so making the data accessible again to the public. We have the shark tracking on our website where you can see, like you can select a shark and you can track on like where it's going. I should mention it's not in real time. It's not a monitoring or tracking system in that sense. Like you can't check this and say, oh, there's no shark right now around, Hanauma Bay. Like we didn't like tag all the sharks that are in the water. And we also don't receive the data in real time. So it's really, it's a research project to inform decision-making on the state level. And we wanted to make sure that the public is informed, like, all the way through, but it's not a monitoring system. So that needs to be clarified. We also working with those same researchers to get the new generation of tags deployed and use sharks as oceanographers. So it's a really cool concept because the instrumentation to measure something like temperature, salinity, oxygen, like the instrumentation gets so small now these days that it fits into this mini tag, and you can attach the tag to the dorsal fin, and when the shark is roaming through the ocean, it basically collects all this information about, like how much oxygen is at, whatever depth. And then once the shark surfaces, it transmits all the data. So it's just another way to get more insights into what's going on down there. It's really cool. All right, so now I'm moving into the forecast portion. And I'm going to address a little bit of a question about the wave forecasts. But I want to start with the atmospheric forecasts that we develop. So this is, I think, a typhoon from around Guam. But we provide different grids of atmospheric forecasts. They all measure or predict air temperature, wind, rain, humidity, and pressure. And what's special about those forecasts is that they're pretty high resolution for like an island scale. So they take, the topography of the islands into account. And they're another option to what the Weather Service is offering. Like I just put these two in there because I thought that was kind of funny just because it's so red, but I'll tell you why. So on the left side, that's was the wind forecast from a couple of days ago, when it was really windy. So I was like, yeah, of course, it's bright red. And then on the right side, it's the air temperature forecast. And the reason why the whole graph is basically, or the whole map is red, is because Haleakala is just so freaking cold at the moment that like the color bar just shifted, where that section in blue, where that's the coldest, that's the lowest. And so even like a 74, which is really not that hot, makes it seem like it's really hot all over the place. I just thought that was funny. And then going into the wave forecast, the wave forecasts actually use our atmospheric forecasts because the winds have a great impact on the waves. So with this high resolution atmospheric forecast, it can also inform the high resolution wave forecast. And the wave forecasts predict wave height, wave direction, wave period. We have different grids, not just for Hawaii. These are just example images, but also for the entire, not entire, but for other parts of the insular Pacific. And on the right side, you can really see it's like a high resolution island specific forecast. And one plot that I want to point out, which is also on the website, and this is like where your question in the back is hopefully going to be addressed. So the line in gray that's over on this side, like a zigzag lane, that's the buoy observations. So this is actually what's happening out there. But then our wave forecasts, which are generated through modeling, so it's not done by the buoy. It's like a numerical model that's run on the computer. Like we kind of morph them into one graph, so you can see what the actual conditions are, but you can also see what the forecasted conditions are. So for example, to the gentleman in the back, if there would be a swell in the South Pacific, or like a storm system in the South Pacific, like the model would already recognize that and say, okay, something will be coming. It takes about, 4 days to get those waves up here, and then you would see it in the forecast. So it's the forecast, the numerical model that would detect those things, not the buoy. The buoy detects it once it actually hits the buoy. So does that kind of address your question from earlier?
I mean, because I always see like Guy Hawai'i on TV, and he's never right, So it's this.
I'm pretty sure he looks at our buoys, but I don't know which forecast he's looking at.
And then the intervals, right? The time, because you said, I guess the guys on the North Shore were saying, hey, we saw some of the biggest waves we've seen. And you said we had the record spikes. But that was more of like you said, a storm stacking condition. So yeah, it's cool. It's all relative. So.
Cool.
It's still science, right? That's what I was trying to say.
Where do you find this? I'm not able to find this.
Okay, so when you're on the wave buoy pages, there is a tab like where you land on that says plots, and then like I think 2 tabs over, there's like table, spectrum, and forecasts, and it's the forecast tab.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then for our numerical models, we also have an ocean circulation model that predicts water temperature, salinity, currents, and sea surface height. That model is also popular for fishermen. I'm not exactly sure like how they use it, but there's something about the currents, and I think also the temperature, like if there's major shifts, like there's areas of interest. So we also have coastal forecasts, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this. But one of the forecasts that we have is a wave run-up forecast. So if you think about the shoreline and, like where you have like the swash that's normally maybe covering like half of the sand. But, if there's really a mix of, let's say, really high tides and then maybe a big swell event, like big waves, it really could push the water further up. And we've been seeing this along the South Shore, but really heavily along the North Shore, where a lot of erosion has happened recently. And so we have a 6-day forecast to predict how bad the wave run-up is going to be. And that's the plots over here. And the plots that I'm showing, that's from this last weekend, where obviously, like we had so much wave energy. Luckily, the tides weren't quite as high, so the impact wasn't quite as bad. But this is all about preparedness. Like if you have a forecast, if you know something is coming, you can prepare accordingly. And also county and state agencies can do whatever they can do, potentially close roads if necessary or other things. We're working on the next generation of wave run-up forecasting by using a numerical model. And we're doing this for West Maui. We got a NOAA grant just to develop this. West Maui has experienced really bad erosion. I don't want to compare because it's hard to compare, but it's definitely up to par with what we're seeing here on the North Shore, or even worse, where buildings are already falling into the ocean. And the reason why is like Maui is a really special case. They have like West Maui is a very special case. This is the bathymetry, so like the ocean depth, or like what it looks like on the ocean floor. So like the purple is the deepest part. It's a really deep channel, and between Lanai and West Maui, it's really shallow. That's, by the way, also the part that the sharks tend to hang out in, right? But what happens is, and I'm going to put this up, and this is like from our numerical model. So for the middle column, if you get a north swell, so you get like really high wave energy from the north, the waves, because of the bathymetry, actually like bend, they refract around. And it's not just hitting the north part of West Maui. It actually like wraps around with these fingers and can even like get to the southern part of West Maui, and vice versa too. Like if it's coming from the south, you will also see some impact in the north. So it's a really challenging environment, and there has been a lot of damage already. What we're trying to do is develop really high resolution space or place specific forecasts. So you can see like we've broken up the shoreline into all these different sections. So we're going to develop forecasts for each of those sections. And they all going to be different, because if it's a north swell, you might see impacts in the north and maybe in some areas in the south, but not everywhere. And so just because of the variability, like you need to really break it down into these little domains. We've also used pressure sensors. We deployed them to get input for our modeling, so that helps. These are just some in the field photos of like the deployment of the sensors. And then last but not least, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time, again, like we have a lot of data that we're wrestling, and we have them in our servers. For our expert users, they can download everything and do their own analysis. But for the general audience, I would definitely recommend our website. It's pretty easy, I think, to understand. If you go under waves, that's where you find everything wave related. So you're going to find the wave observations from the buoy and the forecast, currents, shoreline impacts. So it's pretty straightforward. You get the shark tagging right there. And then we also have a data visualization platform called Voyager, So that's for, like, I would say, the user that wants a little bit more than just looking at the buoy. Like, for example, if you want to overlay, like your wave forecast with like another layer, and you also want to have the bathymetry, like you can overlay all of this in one viewer. So that's also freely accessible online. Everyone can use it. The website is paciooos.org/Voyager. You can play around, you can't break it. I mean, you can just do your thing. This is just another example from Voyager. These are all the tide and water level stations. So you can click on all of them. You can see what's going on. So making data accessible. This is water quality data from a citizen scientist project in West Maui, where they're sampling the shoreline, and we provide or we make the data accessible. We've also worked with Hawai'i Sea Grant to develop a platform for their king tides project, where they try to get citizen scientists to take pictures along the shoreline and track, what impacts the king tides have left. And so we serve the photos so that people can actually see what's going on. You might have also heard about the Hawaii Sea Level Rise Viewer. That's like a state initiative. And again, we did like the data visualization portion, where you can access these different sea level rise exposure areas and see, with, let's say, like a sea level rise of 2 feet, which areas would be impacted. And that's statewide. So I just zoomed into Kauai here, but it's available for Oahu. So that's also on our website. And last but not least, in the interest of time, we have a big conference coming up. It's the Ocean Obs 19 conference. It's a decadal conference. It's the first time ever in the US. And it's going to be here in Honolulu, which is really exciting. It's in September. And yeah, if you're interested, or if you know someone who might be interested, just let me know and I can provide more information. And that's it.
Thank you, Fiona. We do have time for 1 or 2 questions.
I know, I used up all my time.
That's okay.
I mean, yeah, sorry. Yes.
So I noticed on the data sets that you have the Wave Watch, and there's also something called
Swan.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
Wave Watch 3 is like the most popular and most used kind of wave forecast. Swan is a much higher resolution forecast. So, the grids that, for example, we have for all the entire Hawaiian Islands would be Wave Watch 3, but then the island-specific forecast would be done by Swan. It's just a different type of model that can handle those fine nuances better.
But they're using the same buoy data. It's just that it's a different.
Yeah, it's not just, they also use atmospheric data. I mean, there's a lot of input into models. But yeah, they use all of that. Yeah.
So, this is all monitored in US water, right? Is there any integration with either other data collection agencies for the US or the rest of the world, and are they somehow?
Yeah, so there's, for example, what our IOOS, so the US Integrated Ocean Observing System, there's also a EuroGOOS, so it's the European Ocean Observing System. But then, for example, Australia and New Zealand, they're much better in covering the southern Pacific. But yeah, there's also we've also worked with folks from China. So I guess the Pacific is somewhat challenging because there's so many countries. So I would think that from the US side, we're probably the most organized or structured just because we're part of that larger system. But there are other initiatives going on. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.